Are you a fan of movies that can make your skin crawl to the point where you have to shed into a new body?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Well, boy oh boy do I have the flick for you. Cue the intro! Greetings, movie flicker pickers and podcast listeners. Welcome to the Pic-a-Flic podcast, a series where I, your host, Weston Wonder, reviews a variety of movies and sporadically TV shows, both old and new. Before we start, I would like to ramble around for a minute or two or three. Skip ahead if you want to get straight into review stuff. How's everybody feeling out there? Anything interesting happened this past week? I know Grammy nominations came out a few days ago. Andre 3000's flute album, New Blue Sun, actually got an Album of the Year nomination, and call me a masochist here, but I'm kind of hoping that this album wins to see the social media timeline in flames. Surely the Beatles winning Record of the Year for a song they've had in the shelves for over 50 years would elicit a similar reaction because newer acts are predicted to get a win, right?
I remember you was conflicted.
Ah, yes, and rapper extraordinaire, Canadian Bacon's #1 nemesis, Kendrick Lamar, snagged 5 nominations alone for his tune Not Like Us. Elsewhere, Beyonce, who leads the most nominations received this year with 11, Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, Chopper Roan, Sabrina Carpenter, and Charlie XCX thrive in the general fields, while other artists take charge in various genres. The Rolling Stones, the Black Keys, the Black Crows, Green Day, and Pearl Jam appear in the rock categories. Usher, SZA, Childish Gambino, Kehlani, and Coco Jones appear in the R&B categories. Eminem, Future, Doechii, Glorilla, and Common appear in the rap categories. Shaboozey, Jelly Roll, and Chris Stapleton, as well as Beyonce, appear in country. Shakira, Anita, J Balvin, and Bad Bunny appear in Latin, and so on and so forth. It's looking to be an interesting event that I might cover depending on my schedule at that point. Anyways, is there anything else that was of substance that happened recently? I'm trying to remember here. Looks like I have to check my logs. Well, speaking of substance, that's the movie that I'm going to be talking about today. Now, I've been hearing the social interwebs raving about this film, and the jarring behind-the-scenes stills that I kept seeing popped up on the timeline was nothing short of intriguing. So, upon further review, I caved in and decided to give this movie a watch. And what is about to follow are my raw, mumbo-jumbo thoughts about it. But first, let me fill you in about what this movie is even about. Meet the illustrious Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi Moore, a middle-aged movie star turned fitness guru who has quickly dropped from her TV program by the male higher-ups back in the show thanks to the good old-fashioned sexism and ageism combo thinly disguised under the low rating scheme. After a nearly devastating accident, Elizabeth is desperate to cling onto her youth and has then slipped a number to purchase a drug serum known as the Substance, where you can spawn a younger version of yourself and live vicariously through it. And in Elizabeth's case, her younger self is eventually named Sue, played by Margaret Qualley. In order for the new and old bodies to live, they must follow one important rule. They have to switch every 7 days. While one thrives, the other falls idle and must be fed to keep from decaying side effects. While the back and forth switches start off nice and swell, things turn toward darker edge as both parties grow frustrated with each other. Sue, who is unsurprisingly a hit with both production staff and audiences alike, starts committing to the switching periods later and later, while Elizabeth becomes a depressed, reclusive shell of her former self. As tensions rise to a boiling point, the consequences of failing to moderate a balance between two entities take fold for well, it is actually mostly for worse. So my first thoughts about this movie once the credits rolled were,
what the fuck?
But I will say that after that initial shock went away, I realized that this was one of the few movies that I've seen this year that had a heavy amount of hype backing it, and I can easily see why I did because I really enjoyed this. Alongside the terrific direction from filmmaker Qualley, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, the visual and sound crews really popped off in various scenes, such as the intake of the Substance, which has moments that make it look like a Matrix-level red-pilled nightmare, and the outrageous transformations as things go awry between the old and new bodies. The movie is great at keeping you at the edge of your seat as Elizabeth learns the ins and outs of this Substance stuff. The body horror element is chilling. The only previous references where I can say I felt truly disturbed at seeing this are movies like Sorry to Bother You and The Fly, but as the effects are visibly apparent as the film progresses, it gets more skin-crawling to see. Demi Moore's transformation especially rivals Glenn Close's in The Deliverance. The final act in particular blends both old and new entities, and, well, let's just say it rivals a movie like Carrie with how gory things could get in the end. The special shout out to the makeup team for how unnerving the designs get. There is only 3 well-known actors billed in the credits, and each brings something to the table. This movie offers a great comeback vehicle for Demi Moore after being referenced at some event where a comedian made a callback to one of her old movies, which didn't end well apparently. But she's really great in the role of the disrespected Elizabeth here. Very frantic, and at the end her story becomes extremely tragic and heartbreaking. And while I can see this happening to middle-aged women in real life, it's a bit difficult for me to see this happening to Demi freaking Moore. She looks great for her age, 62 years of that. She does have a hilarious scene to this, where Elizabeth is watching Sue on the telly and is ranting and sarcastically raving about her. You gotta check for that one. Margaret Qualley is now 2 for 2 and starring in bizarre movies this year, previously appearing in Kinds of Kindness, which, what do you know, I reviewed a while back. Shameless plug here, check that out later. But that's besides the point. She's also terrific in the role of Sue. She matches the energy of Elizabeth in becoming more desperate to keep their bodies intact as things get worse. Sue also has an intense scene where she goes full on Kill Bill levels of violence on Elizabeth, which was absolutely brutal to watch as this goes on for some minutes. Side note, I think I might have some one-sided beef with the husband Jack Antonoff now.
He's pretty, SpongeBob.
Question, can Jack Antonoff fight? Can he? I'm just asking for a friend here. As I mentioned this next actor, I must say that he has one of the most skin-crawling scenes in this entire movie. And there's a lot of crazy stuff in here, but there's nothing quite as crazy as one Mr. Dennis Quaid, the sleazy producer whose personality graduated from the Martin Short School of Flamboyance. While precocious Neanderthals may have been introduced to him via his daring, I think that's the term, performance as Ronald Reagan, my Gen Z self was first introduced to him as the voice of Granddad Redbeard Krabs in SpongeBob. So it's nice to see him branch out to new things. I thought Shark Tale would make me feel bad for Shark depicted in film, but Dennis Quaid said, "Hold my beer," and proceeded to chow down in the most gratuitously disgusting way possible. And these camera close-ups don't do us, the viewer, any favors here. Disgusting! In fact, any other time he's speaking and enunciating certain words like smile and star, the camera is way too close to his face. One last quick thing that I would like to mention is the musical score from composer Rafferty. The musical elements carry a lot of the intense moments that happen in the film, and I know that the additional sound design make this quite compelling to watch in the theaters. Now on the Pic-a-Flic rating scale, in the words of John Wick, yeah, I'm thinking 4 stars. This is the type of movie that is so much of a mind warp that you probably will have to watch only once and probably never again. There are great performances from the cast here, and once again it's a bang-up job from the director and the team alike. I highly recommend you watch it, but I must warn you to be prepared for some of the slimiest visuals if you're easily queasy about these kinds of body horror movies. And that about wraps up this ball of frenetic confusion of a movie and this review. Next week, Thursday to be precise, I'm throwing it back to the godfather of my childhood praises, the taxi driver of my childhood praises, the Citizen Kane of my childhood praises, you get the point. And that is none other than the first SpongeBob movie, celebrating its 20th anniversary this month. So, if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to be among the first to get notifications of when the reviews drop, be sure to subscribe to the pod wherever you listen to said show, and tell a friend to tell another friend to check out the pod. Also, if you want to follow the show on social media, we can be found on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok under the username handle Pic-a-Flic Pod. That is at PICAFLICPOD. Now, if review logging is your thing, then you may be familiar with the service Letterboxd, where you can also find non-audio exclusive reviews I done under the aforementioned Pic-a-Flic Pod username. This month, I plan to put out Letterboxd-only reviews for some buzzed-about films from this year, including Sing Sing starring Coleman Domingo, Strange Darling, and finally Dune Part 2. So be sure to follow me there to be on the lookout for these reviews. Once again, thank you all for tuning in for this review, and I hope you check out the next one. But always remember, respect the balance of life and live it the best way you know how. Until the next one, this is the Western Wonder, and I'm signing out. Be sure to stay tuned for the podcast sponsor at the end of this episode. Peace!
Bye, have a great time!
Hey Mark, I was listening to Paramore the other day, and it really made me think about the amygdala and the limbic system.
You just made those words up, didn't you?
What, Paramore?
We're the Nevermind the Music podcast, where one musician
And one psychologist
talk songwriting and the mind, one song at a time.
We'll hear everything from Green Day and Outkast
to Stevie Wonder and Dua Lipa.
And we mostly try to stay on topic.
Except for when we don't want to.
Never mind the music, wherever you get your podcasts.